That's the big thing.
United States Senator Arlen Specter visited Lancaster's Franklin and Marshall College Tuesday morning, speaking and taking questions from those in attendance.
Morning.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for coming today. I'm going to try to introduce someone who really needs no introduction here in the state of Pennsylvania, and someone who's been a terrific friend to the college and to the city of Lancaster, and so we're very pleased to have him with us today. Senator Arlen Specter is the longest serving senator in Pennsylvania history, and he was elected to the Senate. He's actually a native of Kansas, but he early on became a Pennsylvania resident and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and Yale University Law School. His long and distinguished career is a little too complicated to go into right now, but I would like to point out that he plays some very critical roles right now in our history. He's the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee right now, which is a very important position, and he's the senior member of the Appropriations Committee. And I think that today he might shed some light on some of our current situations. So please welcome Senator Arlen Specter.
Thank you. At the outset, I want you to know that everybody sitting in the front row is available for the raffle of a big gift certificate, and the people in the back row are going to be penalized. I'm not quite sure, but as I look at the configuration of this audience, I wonder how you selected your seats. On a serious level, I'm delighted to be at Franklin and Marshall. You have an extraordinary university here. And it is nice to come to talk to students and some academicians. My standard format is to talk relatively briefly and to really find out what is on your minds. The Congress is in recess, so it gives me a chance to travel the state and in a representative democracy to find out what people are thinking. Good to get out of Washington. The big issue, of course, is the economy. The $700 billion bailout. Frankly, I thought we rushed to judgment on it. When the problem broke in mid-September, I said to the leaders of the Senate who arranged the schedule that we ought to take our time and not rush to judgment. And there are a lot of very complex issues in dealing with that much money. I thought, for example, that we'd better to loan money to worthy institutions as opposed to buying toxic stock. When you buy toxic commercial paper, there's no market for it, so you don't know what it's worth. And I was also concerned about not having votes in the Senate and the House. We were just presented with a package, take it or leave it, and it had a lot of pork in it. When I say pork, it's not help for Franklin and Marshall, it's not help for the Lancaster to Harrisburg light rail system, which are investments for the future. So I have had some grave concerns about it. When the House of Representatives defeated the bill back on September 29th, I was shocked that they couldn't count the votes. They have 445 members of the House of Representatives. That's a well-known fact. It takes 223 votes. My granddaughters could count to 223. And then when the Senate was called back Wednesday night for an emergency vote, we pretty much had our hands tied. Now, after some deliberation, they're adopting a little different plan to invest in banks to try to unfreeze the flow of credit without credit, the country can't function. And it's, I think, attacking the problem in the right direction. We need to be careful that we don't nationalize our banking institution. We're a capitalistic society, free enterprise, and keeping the government out of as much as we can. So that whatever we do there, I think, needs to be very sensitively done, and make sure it's temporary. Internationally, we face an enormous number of problems. I think had we known Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction, we wouldn't have gone into Iraq. Once there, we don't want to leave it destabilized. The war in Afghanistan is a real problem. We need more help from other countries. Most of the world did not agree with us about Iraq, but they do on Afghanistan, but we need more than just U.S. military there. If we're successful in establishing a democracy in Afghanistan, they have been elected head of the state now, but very, very rickety with a lot of concerns about drug trade. It could be a great accomplishment if we get a democracy in Afghanistan and if one works out in Iraq. I spent a lot of time on the environmental issue. We are drastically in need of developing alternative sources of energy, hydropower, solar, wind power, to relieve the dependence on OPEC oil. And I've been deeply involved in the global warming issue, co-sponsoring legislation with Senator Bingaman, a Democrat of New Mexico, to move to reduce carbon emissions. I spend a lot of time on health care and education. You may have heard I had a bout with Hodgkin's, had chemotherapy. That's a tough regimen, tough but tolerable. I was able to keep up all my duties on in the Senate. One of the consequences of chemotherapy is that you lose all your hair. And when I turned bald, it's coming back a little now. When I turned bald, I got more comments about my hairstyle than about my public policy. I got some suggestions on how to wear a toupee, but I didn't like that idea. Then I decided that I was going to reject. People said I should shave my head and become a sex symbol. Excuse me, young lady, what's so funny? But I decided not to do that either for two reasons. One, my wife was against it. And, secondly, I wasn't qualified. But I have worked hard on the issue of funding for the National Institutes of Health. When I joined the Appropriations Committee, which was the first committee I joined when I was elected to the Senate in 1980, it seemed to me that preventing illness was the best way to deal with it. And I've taken the lead with Senator Tom Harkin on a bipartisan basis to raise funding for NIH from $12 to $30 billion. And I spent a lot of time on education. Under my chairmanship, we increased Pell Grants from less than $2,400 to more than $4,300. And we need guaranteed student loans, and we need them with low interest rates. I believe that education is the key to the future, and everybody ought to get as much education as he or she can assimilate. Well, that's a bird's eye view of a very complex picture of Washington. Let me pause at this point to invite your comments, observations, questions. Let me see how many questions I have. I know how long my answers will be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Going. 7, 8. Gone. You're first.
Who do you think? Who do you think? Just be honest. Best you can. Won't get upset. Any one way or the other. Who do you think in this election is the best leader to help us in these troubled times with the economy?
Who do you think is going to get upset? You and me. why would anybody be upset? You're asking a relevant, courteous question, and I'll give you my opinion on it. I say McCain, and not from a point of view of partisanship, although I am a Republican, but I would choose John McCain because of his experience. I think that Senator Obama is a very capable guy. I've gotten to know him to some extent. He has his office right down the hall from mine on the 7th floor of the Work Senate office building, and he's really been a phenomenal personality with his approach. I've gotten to know John McCain very well in 22 years in the Senate, and we live in a very, very troubled world. And the international scene, I believe, would benefit from McCain's leadership because he knows defense policy. Been in the armed services for 22 years. He has a military background. And I'm not talking about being a war hero. That's yesterday. But his experience in defense matters is important. His experience in foreign policy is important. Senator Obama has been in the Senate for less than one term, less than 4 years. I think the economic policies are very, very difficult for anybody. I think the situation we're in today, you tend to blame Republicans because it's on a Republican watch. But there was a really fascinating article in the New York Times last week, October 9th, about how we got here and how the Fed and Chairman Greenspan were largely responsible, and how it goes back through Democratic administrations and Republican administrations. So it's not a matter of John McCain's fault, but it's a spirited contest. Obama seems to have a significant lead at this point. I believe you can't count anybody out. I've seen a lot of elections change in the course of 4 weeks, a long time. Could have an international crisis, and the focus might shift totally away from the economy and the foreign policy. Yes, sir. Number 2 on the way to 8.
Okay. Senator, I wanted to thank you for all the support that you've given for the Keystone corridor for Amtrak. We really appreciate that, those of us who travel there every now and again. And I hope you'll forgive a frivolous question, but when you moved to Pennsylvania, you didn't happen to end up in Scranton, did you?
Did
You had to end up in Scranton?
Did I end up in Scranton? No.
Okay. Well, that was less frivolous than I thought. No, the question I had, though, was...
Nobody really asked your question.
I was listening to WITF on the way over here, and Mr. Baldridge, who is the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce here, was taking questions about the economy also, and had callers, many of whom were small business people who were really worried about the idea of regulation. But whatever kind of regulation is needed doesn't apply totally to all industry. It will apply to the financial markets, where actually fraudulent cases have come up about credit default swaps. That's actually insurance, where you don't have to have any cash reserves to back up the insurance that you're providing. And the mixing of terrible mortgages with other mortgages and saying that they're all good is outright fraud. It would seem to me that we really need some regulation in the financial markets, and I'd appreciate your comments.
Well, the people in small business, I think, do not need to fear regulation. Their problem right now is the unavailability of credit. And the plan now to put credit into the banks with some guarantees for any future loans should unfreeze the credit market. That's what they're looking for. And on the regulations, you're right, there's been a lot of misrepresentation of value. That is fraud. If you put something on the balance sheet at a higher value than you know to be true, that's a crime. And there may well be some criminal prosecutions coming out a situation like they were in Enron. And the regulatory system is going to be devoted to things like these derivatives. They now have so many sophisticated financial transactions that they're not understood, and they haven't been regulated. When Bear Stearns was taken over, Robert Rubin, former Secretary of the Treasury, said he doesn't understand what had happened. Well, if Bob Rubin doesn't know what happened, what do you expect Barney Frank to know? Guess you don't know Barney Frank too well. That's a laugh line. He's the chairman of the House of Financial Services today. But the regulation also has to be done carefully. Sarbanes-Oxley came in and over-regulated and caused problems. So it's a delicate matter not to interfere too much with the free enterprise system, to let business handle matters as opposed to having government tell you what to do. But sometimes business goes too far and you have to step in. Yes, sir. Number 3 on the 8.
I have to read this because otherwise it would ramble a little bit. Now, this is the question for you, Senator. If I, as a private citizen, I aid and abet in committing a crime, I will be prosecuted and receive some punishment. I can plead that I was bribed or threatened with bodily harm, but that doesn't change the facts. How then is it that in the highest halls of government, national government, members of the executive branch can intentionally commit crimes against the Constitution, which they swore to uphold, protect, and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and against American people and persons the world over, crimes in which they were aided and abetted by the legislative branch, which acted in the full knowledge that they were betraying their oath of office, and yet escape any consequences. The members of Congress can plead that they were bribed or threatened with bodily harm, but that should not mitigate the dereliction of their sworn duty. The legislative branch has had 7 years to prepare and initiate impeachment proceedings against the executive branch, but they have not done this. Senator, you have been an influential member of that body for over 20 years. Why have you not used your position as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee to initiate long ago impeachment proceedings and your committee, and to pressure your counterparts in the House to do so? I know that the Senate does not indict, the Senate prosecutes, but with your position and influence, you could have had an effect on this. Thank you.
Well, we had an impeachment proceeding in 1999, and
that was a non-issue. But this is a serious issue. The Constitution has been violated by people who swore an oath.
well, to impeach somebody, they have to be guilty of a high crime and misdemeanor. And the reference to the impeachment proceeding of President Clinton is not an irrelevancy. It was not pursued with any seriousness. No witnesses were called. And it was found to be not a good use of the government's time. And I paused only on Clinton long enough to say that my position was that he had still public confidence. He should have been prosecuted after he left office. And if he hadn't been impeached, I think there might have been a criminal prosecution for obstruction of justice and perjury. But when you talk about executive branch officials who should be impeached and Congress aiding and abetting, I'd be interested to know what you have in mind specifically. But you have to prove that somebody has committed a high crime and misdemeanor. What act would you point to which you think is a high crime and or misdemeanor?
I would consider lying based on an ideology which was erroneous, but had to be supported. So evidence was cooked, and there was lying done to the Senate and to the House and to the American people, particularly in the case of the war against Iraq.
Okay.
But there
Now you come to your first specific point,
Yeah.
and I'd be glad to give you.
Well, I can't spend all my time. You have to answer other questions. So.
Well, I mentioned that in the context that you can't generalize when you talk about a crime. I was a DA for a long time in Philadelphia, and you got to be specific as to what the conduct was.
Guantanamo Bay, torture of citizens against the Geneva Conventions, and we signed that and ratified the Geneva Conventions. It becomes a part of the Constitution that we will abide by international agreements.
Yes.
It's a crime. It's a war crime.
Well, let me take them one at a time.
Well, but that's part of it. I mean, I didn't bring a list.
Well, let me take them two at a time. Let me take them. As I said, had we known that Saddam did not have weapons of mass destruction, I don't think we would have gone in. And I do not think that there is evidence that President Bush knew that the intelligence that he was given was false.
Ron Suskind says opposite of that.
Well,
He says they had intimate connections with the head of intelligence in Iraq who was telling them that there was no weapons of mass destruction.
Suskind says a lot of things, and a lot of people say a lot of things, but I'm talking seriously about the hard evidence that you need to show that someone is falsifying information under oath. You may not like his policies, and I didn't like functioning on the false intelligence, but you're true, I was there, and I was one of them. But you have the CIA bringing you reports, and they're charged with gathering the intelligence. And to prove a crime, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody had intent to deceive. You talk about Guantanamo. I voted that waterboarding was torture and shouldn't be done.
A lot more than just waterboarding. It goes across the whole spectrum.
Well, more generalizations. What do you know that was worse than waterboarding?
Being tied to, well, not necessarily worse. Because
well, that's the point I'm making. I'm making the point.
But torture is more than just that. Being chained to the floor and exposed to extreme temperatures, both hot and cold, and physically held in captivity, chained to the floor.
Okay, I joined the Senate in condemning those practices on a 90-9 vote. And then on habeas corpus, which the Congress took away, I led the fight to bring habeas corpus back. It was defeated 51 to 48. And you had Alberto Gonzalez as the Attorney General. He's under investigation now for possible perjury in what he said about the firing of the U.S. attorneys. If you saw those hearings, you saw what I had to say to Attorney General Gonzalez about how he was not candid, not forthright. And when he said habeas corpus wasn't in the Constitution, it was ridiculous. And as a result of those hearings, and I don't want to take too much credit, he was really run out of office. That's what happened to Gonzalez. And if they could prove that what he answered was deliberately false, he won't be impeached, but he'll be prosecuted criminally. But when you don't like the policies that go on, and I don't like Guantanamo, I don't like taking away habeas corpus, and I don't like torture, and I don't like waterboarding. But when you want to get down to the element of putting somebody in jail, you got to have a specification of what they did specifically on a certain time and place.
I have to make one comment. If
one more comment.
Yeah, one more comment. If in this atmosphere, someone in the Homeland Security Department should decide that I am an enemy combatant, I have no recourse. I can be taken away and I will be put into the Constitution-free zone. I will have no habeas corpus. I will not be able to confront my accusers. I cannot have any counsel. I am essentially in limbo, and you realize that, I'm sure, because you've been around a long time.
No, I don't realize that, and you are wrong. The Supreme Court brought habeas corpus back, and right now there are 17 people in the District Court of Washington, D.C. who are having habeas corpus hearings. They're classified as enemy combatants, and the district judge has ordered them freed. And that case is now on appeal to the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. So you're wrong. Categorically, provably wrong.
Yes.
Have you had enough comments and I can go to number 4?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Number 4 on the way to 8. I won't be so tough on the next question. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Senator, first of all, thank you so much for coming.
Are you sure?
It's a pleasure to see you today. You look very well.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding corporations' taxes. We have a situation now in which we're seeing many of our major corporations, to include financial institutions, suffering globally in part because of a very high rate of taxation on corporations' income. The corporations, large, medium, and small sized, effectively employ a large and growing proportion of our population. Why can we not make it easier for companies to stay afloat and to progress with lower corporation taxation?
Well, you raise a good point, and the analogy is frequently made to compare our corporate tax rates to, say, a country like Ireland. And we have maintained the tax rates where they are because of our deficit and because of our national debt. And we have lowered the tax rates, for example, on capital gains, as you may know. And that has stimulated more business. We've collected more revenue from transaction sales as a result of lowering those taxes. And I think that in a new administration, there's going to be a reevaluation of our tax rate. But what I have tried to do is move to the flat tax, which is a little different than the point you're making. This is Josh Snyder. He's going to his briefcase to pull out a flat tax return. The system was designed by Hall and Rabushka, 2 professors at Stanford, to have a flat tax you could fill out in the course of 15 minutes. And we now spend estimated upward of $285 billion a year on tax compliance. But you put your finger on a point which we're going to reanalyze again, and it's a calculation as to how much more taxes we get if we stimulated the economy and brought more business to the United States and more free enterprise with a lower tax burden. Number 5 on the way to 8, yes, sir?
Hi, sorry, this question kind of piggybacks off of that, and my understanding is limited, but the capital gains tax is lower relative to other countries right now because of the Bush tax cuts. Is that correct?
Well, I can't tell you about all other countries, but it was reduced materially in the United States, yeah.
Because, I don't know, somebody mentioned to me that if an Obama administration were, in his administration, they would reevaluate the capital gains tax, raise it, which would, in theory, be detrimental to small business because of the fact that companies going private, from private to public, wouldn't do it in the United States as frequently as they would now. You know what I mean? I think it's called an IPO.
Well, on the movement from a public company to a private company,
The other way around.
from a private company to a public company.
Why you wouldn't want to go public where you're going to get taxed at a higher rate if you could do it in a country where you can be taxed at a lower rate, and that's a function of the capital gains tax and what percent you're being taxed on.
Well, I don't know that it would bear on going to another country. A lot of companies go public when they're private companies, go on the stock exchange and offer their stock to the public. And there are some companies which move in exactly the opposite direction. They don't like being a public company. They buy out their shareholders, the people who really run the company. I don't know that the capital gains tax is really determinative on that. I don't know that it is. You're raising some pretty heavy subjects, and I think a new administration is going to find a reevaluation of taxes.
My question, I guess, was: is that something that they're looking at, the flat gains?
Flat tax, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Flat tax is under very active consideration. I have legislation in it. You get the prize. You get the other copy. We have some more prizes, but nobody in the rack room gets one.
Senator, we're at 6, but we're going to have to start to wrap this up.
I'll put to 5 now. I see 3 hands, 6, 7, and 8. I'll take all 3 hands. You too? You saying I can't count? Okay, 4 hands. Let's go. You're up, sir.
First of all, I just want to thank you for all the service you've done to the state. And although I haven't, you don't need it. Although I haven't always agreed with your policies, Senator Specter, you've been a model of service to this state. And I'm so glad you're better.
Thank you.
I mean, my wife and I were really, when we saw you sick, we both felt really badly about it. I mean, you look great, and that's great. Thank you for all you've done. You started today by answering question 1, which was, who should you support the president, and the criterion you used was experience. And I think almost any reasonable person, I'm voting for Obama, but almost any reasonable person would agree with you that Senator McCain has a tremendous amount of experience. The question I have is then, what happens if he passes away? The person he's chosen has almost no experience in the areas that you pointed to, whereas Senator Biden, you have known your entire career in the Senate, has an amazing amount of experience. Make me feel better today, Senator Specter, as you've done many times in your career. Tell me that if Senator McCain, God forbid, would die, that this woman could actually handle that job.
Be honest.
I think she has made a start on answering her question, because she has to answer the question. I can't answer the question. Her experience is obviously very, very limited. Mayor of a city, a small city in Alaska, governor of Alaska for a year and a half. Her responses initially were not too good on the interview. Her debate with Senator Biden was really quite good.
She was coached.
She is obviously an intelligent woman, but she obviously does not have exposure in the kind of international problems, or she has some exposure in economic problems by virtue of being governor of the state. Senator McCain chose her for a couple of reasons. Candidates are selected really for 2 reasons: their competency to govern and their help on winning an election. And she has been very, very helpful on popularity and mobilizing people. Senator McCain knows her a lot better than I do, and I have a lot of confidence in Senator McCain, but I'm not going to delegate my power to select and evaluate to anybody. Harry Truman was a big surprise when he became president. He was an unknown senator for 10 years in Missouri, not part of the Pendergast machine, a gang, people corrupted, convicted. I think she's moving along, and I say give her a chance. We have her, and she's up on the ballot. So the American people have a chance to say no if the American people choose to do so. I think she has potential. I've had a chance to get to know her a little better in talking to her, but experience is important, and I don't mistake that. But so is David Talent, and I think she has a fair amount of that.
Thank you.
Okay, I have 4 more hands up. Go ahead, sir.
How big of an issue do you think our growing national debt is, and how do you feel we're ever going to get reduced?
That's a good question.
I think our national debt is out of control. I think our deficit is out of control. What I think we need is a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget. I voted for it 3 times in my tenure in the Senate. Last time in 1996 it came within 1 vote. But I think the government has to live within its means, just like Lancaster County, just like you and me, or we end up in the bankruptcy court. Yes, sir? I see 2 more hands after you. Yes, sir.
I want to express appreciation for your reasoned, hard analytical voice in the Senate.
Thank you.
And would like to communicate the appreciation of a number of people in this community for your advocacy of direct diplomacy with Iran, with Syria, and others throughout the region. I would like to ask what concretely you have been doing or are doing currently to move that kind of initiative forward. I know of statements that you made earlier in the year in response to Condoleezza Rice and others in that regard, but I'm wondering what you, along with some colleagues in the Senate, may be doing in that regard.
Well, I can be very specific. I've been trying to arrange interparliamentary meetings with Iranian parliamentarians. And I had an invitation, a suggestion from the International Parliamentary Union to meet the Speaker of the Iranian House in Geneva on Sunday, the 12th of October. And I cleared my schedule. I was prepared to go, and he refused to meet with me because I didn't have a high enough rank.
Well,
he wanted the Speaker of the Congress instead of the mere senator. But I've traveled to Syria 15 times. I make an annual trip in December. I plan to go again. I've gotten to know Bashar Assad and Hafiz al-Assad, and I have talked to the Israelis, to Prime Minister Olmert, and before that Netanyahu and Barak, Ehud Barak, and I've spoken extensively on the Senate floor. I wrote an article for the Washington Quarterly, a learned magazine on this subject. I'm pushing it.
thank you very much. And I'd like to underscore the large body of expertise among Iranians and Americans about their respective relations between the two countries. And we could be drawing on that kind of potential much more than just having these strident interchanges with President Ahmadinejad.
I think you have to treat those folks with dignity and respect. You don't have to agree with them, but you have to talk to people.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You have your hand up.
Can you comment at all on F&M's proposed relocation of the rail yard here? And the wisdom of potentially allocating $28 million of taxpayers' money to do so?
Well, first, where'd you get this beautiful child?
She resembles my husband.
Basically all I know about it is what I read in the newspapers. It's not a federal matter. I think that I know that it's a very controversial issue in the city, and that some people want to move it so there's room for expansion in Franklin and Marshall, and others do not want to have the relocation. And with all the problems I have to worry about with Iran and the economy, I find it most prudent not to jump off a bridge unless I really know what I'm talking about. And, until I know more, that's all I'm going to say. I think that's the last hand. Yes, sir.
I wonder what you think about the recent policy change at Customs and Border Patrol. As I understand, as of this July, border inspectors are able to copy or impound people's laptops or cell phones without any suspicion, much less probable cause of wrongdoing. And I realize that there's an important concern about protecting the U.S. against terrorism, but I also think that there's an important civil liberties issue that one needs to balance.
I have not heard that the Border Patrol can get into your laptop, and they ought not to have the power to do that because that's a search and seizure. It's covered by our privacy laws. To get access to that kind of information, you have to have probable cause and you have to get a search warrant. You cannot do that. We have been very, very assiduous to try to stop that kind of conduct with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, questions about Guantanamo and about expansive executive authority. I've been very outspoken about the subject generally, that we've had the greatest expansion of executive authority in the history of the country since 9/11. And it's gone too far. You have to have law enforcement tools, but there has to be a balance on civil rights.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much, Senator.
My name's
Hey, Fred. See you
Great.
We're opposed to earmarks on this railroad. We are opposed, and we supported you.
Right.